Without us, you're paying this much for your electricity. We'll make the argument that we can come in and we can lower that to here.
So it sounds like with your model, your interests are aligned with your client. The more savings you can provide, the more value you can provide, the more each of you, benefit from that.
We show them every month, okay, here's what would have happened if we weren't here. Here's what happens because we're here.
What is the nature of the relationship between SolMicroGrid and Morgan Stanley? All right, welcome back to the Solar Surge podcast. Hey, if you're new to the Solar Surge podcast, on this program, we meet with the top CEOs and the top business and thought leaders in the solar and energy storage space. Now, this morning, I'm joined by Kirk Edelman. He's the CEO and founder of SolMicroGrid, and we're going to be talking about a brand new model for owning and utilizing solar. So, Kirk, it's good to see you again. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Absolutely. Well, the chat that we had last week was really eye-opening for me, and I'm really looking forward to learn more about this new model that you're offering to the marketplace, the idea of, solar energy as a service, as opposed to traditional ownership. So, Kirk, for those out there that are not familiar with the term energy as a service, can you explain what does that mean, and how is that different than the way most solar is owned today?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Joe. Really, a lot of people out there developing solar projects will develop them, arrange for them to be constructed and PTO'd, and then turn them over to the customer. So the customer is basically paying the developer to deliver a solar project, a microgrid project in our case. So that's sort of a build and sell model from my perspective. We do something a little bit different. We do it on an as a service basis, so it's energy as a service. And what that means is we do the development, we build the project, we own and operate it. But instead of selling it to the customer and having them pay us for it, we enter into a longer term energy as a service contract, and we provide them all the benefits of the microgrid without them having to make a capital investment to buy the project.
I see. Okay. So how would that differ then from, let's say, a typical power purchase agreement or a lease agreement that we might see today?
Yeah, that's a question we get a lot. And really, they're kind of close cousins to one another. In a power purchase agreement, a third party is basically entering into an agreement to buy power on some sort of term basis. When you start offering energy as a service, it's usually a broader mandate. That's the quick answer, in that we are not just providing a kilowatt hours based upon some pricing formula that may have some sort of capacity payment and some sort of energy payment. We're providing a whole host of energy services. So it might be power from an array, it might be energy storage from a battery. It might be EV charging solutions from EV charging assets. So it's really providing a service which can encompass one or more distributed energy resources.
Interesting. Okay. Now, I understand that this is something that you're able to offer not only for new developments, but also for maybe businesses that already have solar that's on their roof. Can you explain a little bit about how that would work? Let's say somebody already has an existing solar system on their roof, but it may not serve their best interest to continue to own that system directly. I understand you have a solution for people in that scenario.
Yeah, this is our primary business is doing what I just described, and that's sort of our greenfield activity. But we offer a couple of other kind of business models, which we call microgrids and more. One of those other offerings is what we call array to microgrid, or ATM for short. This one we're really excited about because I think there's a lot of people out there. When I say people, we're focused on the C&I market. There's probably a lot of C&I people who have acquired, under a build and sell model that I was referring to a moment ago, acquired a solar array on their property. And they've probably had it for a number of years, and they're benefiting from the generation of solar power that's taking place on their property from the system that they own. what you run into is these things do require some care and love over their lifetime. And a lot of times, people who are not in the energy business and they have this on their property, maybe they make widgets for a living, they're not spending a whole lot of time focused on the power asset that they've acquired. And they may have already taken advantage of certain incentives that they got up front. In that case, I think we show up and we say, listen, we'd be happy to pay you cash for your existing array. So we will write you a check and we will purchase your array that's on your property. And then we can talk to you about adding some of those DER components I referred to a moment ago. So, for example, we could add a battery and provide you with additional cost savings from the battery, or even some resiliency from the battery. And that's a common DER component that we bring into the conversation here. So we'll buy the system for cash up front, so you're no longer in that business. We take care of the O&M and all the maintenance and all the day-to-day headaches of owning a power system. And we can add DER components to give you additional resources. So we could add an EV charging station. We could add that battery I mentioned a moment ago. We could add fuel cells. There's a whole host of components that can be added to the system. So we can take that solar array and essentially turn it into a microgrid. So that's why we call this new offering array to microgrids.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Well, Kirk, as you know, I mean, one of the trends that we've seen here in the industry the past couple of years is a move away from true one-for-one net metering offered by a lot of the utilities. I mean, it's starting on the West Coast and then sort of working its way toward the East Coast, where we live. But that does seem to be the overall trend, is that the one-for-one net metering programs are going away. So if you are going to be installing solar, a higher and higher percentage are going to choose to install storage, as well as other accessories, like you mentioned, EV chargers and other energy management solutions. So, Kirk, in light of everything that's gone on this year, there's been a lot of talk about, the loss of solar tax credits, at least on the residential side, pretty much immediate loss of the tax credits at the end of this year. Some of the commercial credits phasing out over time. As well as potentially impacting tariffs with certain imported equipment. How are you positioning your company and your offering for the solar customer of the 2026 and beyond?
In the renewable energy business, if you've been in this business long enough, you've seen a lot of incentives at the federal or state level come and go. It sort of makes sense. There's no reason to provide incentives once an industry becomes more mature. And I don't think solar is any different. We as an industry, I think, are prepared to respond to what is coming out of Washington these days. And we do have some time to continue doing what we're doing until these changes are implemented. And I think the industry in general is prepared for that. I think we're prepared for that. I mean, all you have to do is look back at the history of PV solar. And it's fascinating because it wasn't but a few years ago, people said, no, PV solar is way too expensive as a form of electricity generation. That's not the future. And now today, a lot of experts will tell you that, power generated from PV solar systems is the cheapest way to generate that power. So, I think the industry is maturing. I think what we are deploying in terms of modules today are just so much more powerful, so much more efficient, and so much cheaper than just a few years ago. I think we are well positioned to continue to support the expansion of this industry, which benefits everyone. You had mentioned net metering a moment ago, and I think that's also an interesting trend. Net metering was a very attractive option for both residential C&I solar projects to take advantage of excess generation. Those systems are becoming less and less lucrative, so we've adapted. Now, instead of oversizing a solar array to take advantage of net metering and off hours, I think the better way to go is to explore battery storage as a way to take advantage of time of use arbitrage opportunities and peak demand shaving. And so that's just a great example of how we evolve with the times as an industry.
Yep, that makes sense. And that's what we're seeing as well. So let's talk about the business and run some of the numbers on this. First off, are there any particular markets where you're focused? Are you focused on the West Coast primarily, or are you offering this nationwide?
Yeah, that's a great point because you look at a map of North America, or let's focus on the you look at a map of the United States, and you can put overlays, and you can put an overlay which says what is the best insulation, where does the sun shine the most, and that'll give you a bit of a sense of that particular dynamic. Then you can put on top of that, what states are the most renewable energy friendly? What states have utilities that allow you to interconnect relatively easily? What states have municipalities that are permitting friendly for renewable energy? You can do all of these things, and it kind of gives you a bit of a heat map of where renewable energy, where solar power is going to be well received, and that heat map hasn't changed a whole lot over time. So, for our model and for C&I solar in general, you see a lot of activity on the West Coast, particularly in California. You see a lot of activity in the Northeast and the Middle Atlantic region. Other parts of the country, for a variety of reasons, aren't as conducive to what we offer. And we're no different, Joe. Right now we have a lot of activity in California. We're starting to do more in places like Massachusetts, New Jersey, Maryland. So we are following in that trend. And because we do it on an as a service basis, that adds a little bit of a wrinkle. And to that, what I mean is where we can add the most value, our energy as a service becomes more attractive. And for us, that really points us in those markets that I just described.
Okay, so if you would sort of describe for me the ideal candidate or the ideal client
Right.
for you. What type of business, what size business, who would make a good candidate and really be able to get the most out of what you're offering?
Yeah. You know, I think where it starts is we are always going to benefit from having a site where we can put on more PV solar modules. So what that means is you do need some space for that. The most efficient way to put these modules on a site is on existing rooftops. So looking at roofs that have a lot of open space, that's always more attractive than being site constrained. So that's one of the things we look at. Having a company that is currently paying relatively high power tariffs, so they're paying their utility a lot of money, relatively speaking, for power. That's going to be a better target for us than someone who's not paying a lot for power. So, our value proposition is one where we're very transparent. We come in and we say, listen, you know, without us, you're paying this much for your electricity. We'll make the argument that we can come in and we can lower that to here. And the difference between those two is the value we bring to the table. Then we split that value very transparently between ourselves and our customer. And we say, okay, from this, we're going to take this much. You're going to take this much. This much is basically coming to our customer in the form of discounted energy from our system. So the more value we can create, which by definition, the upper boundary is what you're going to pay for power already. So what their existing utility is charging them. And then what we can do down here to create that spread, that's driven by getting enough solar capacity on the site, maybe putting in a battery that further enhances those economics. Creating that spread is what our value proposition is all about.
Okay, so then your company, SolMicroGrid, would actually own and operate and maintain that solar system, and you're essentially splitting the energy savings with your client. So the client is just they're just paying you the electric bill. Then they're paying their electric bill to SolMicroGrid at a discounted rate of what they would pay sticking with the power company.
Yeah, basically, they're currently paying a power company for their electricity. We come in and we're going to be giving them our own monthly bill for the power that we provide them. And the way our bill is set up, it's super user friendly. we show them every month, okay, here's what would have happened if we weren't here. Here's what happens because we're here. That created that spread, and we actually have a sharing mechanism that's laid out in our energy as a service documentation, which says, okay, you get X percent and we get Y percent, and the two combined is basically the value we presented on that bill to you. So it's very transparent, and it's a function of a bunch of things. Because we're solar based, a month that's not cloudy is better for us and the customer than a month that is cloudy. The key for us, though, is we're sitting on the same side of the table as our customer. So the more value we create every month, we both benefit. If we create less value, it hurts both of us. So it's not like a zero-sum game, or we're splitting a pie, and the more we get, the less the customer gets. The more value we create, the more both of us benefit.
Well, I like that you mentioned that too, because I think certain critics of the TPO model, particularly for residential solar, would say that, well, a lot of these predatory salespeople will go to the markets with the highest rate of electricity, and they'll price the TPO product so expensive that, yes, there's marginal savings for the owner, maybe 10 or 15% electric bill reduction, where if they had actually competitively market priced the system, they could have gotten the customer a 40 or 50% price reduction. So it sounds like with your model, your interests are aligned with your client. The more savings you can provide, the more value you can provide, the more each of you, benefit from that.
Exactly. And like I said, everything is very transparent, and we've put a lot of work into creating a bill from us that shows them exactly how that was calculated, how we came up with the savings number, and how that savings was shared. So it's a very transparent system. And keep in mind, because it's energy as a service, they had no CapEx. So when they sign up with us, they're getting savings. That's it. They're not making any investment whatsoever. So they don't have to go to their owners or their board and ask for permission to make a capital investment. And we avoid that whole conversation around, okay, this CapEx, is that going to give us a significant return for the use of our capital? So we avoid all of that, because all we're going to them with is, hey, listen, we're presenting that we will spend all the money, we'll create the savings, we'll split them with you, we both benefit. It doesn't get much better than that.
Just a quick word from our sponsor, Schneider Electric, and the new Schneider Home. If you're a contractor or electrician considering which solar and energy management system to offer, then you need to take a look at the new Schneider Home. The Schneider Home provides an all-in-one solution for solar, storage, EV charging, and intelligent load control. The integrated design reduces the total number of components, allowing you to dramatically lower material and labor costs. Schneider Home uses equipment that contractors and electricians already know, like the Square D QO plug-on neutral load center. For over 100 years, Schneider has been helping factories and office buildings optimize energy, and now this technology is available for U.S. homes. Schneider Home is the perfect solution for new construction homes or those needing a main panel upgrade. So if you'd like to learn more information, you can go directly to the Schneider Home commercial website, or click the link in the description below so you can sign up to be a certified installer right away. Makes sense. Okay. Well, Kirk, I've got to ask, because, in light of what we've seen in the industry with some high-profile business failures in the last 1 or 2 years here, particularly I'm thinking of Sonova and SunPower, which are, two of the biggest names in terms of residential solar leases. I think there's a lot of folks out there, myself included, that are concerned, well, if I enter into an energy as a service agreement, or if I enter into some sort of agreement with a third party where I don't own the solar system directly, what happens if that third party goes out of business, or what have you guys done to prevent yourselves from going the route of Sonova or SunPower in light of what we've seen in the last year?
Yeah, it's sort of, because the model is different, it's a different set of risks. I think in general, what I like to tell people is, listen, let's look at the worst possible situation. You sign up for a energy as a service over a period of time that we're going to provide you with a system we put on your property. If suddenly we were to disappear, one, all the equipment is on your property. Worst comes to worst, you're back to where you started from. So you just buy more power from your utility, and that's your downside. You don't get the savings that we told you you were going to get over the life of our agreement. It's an asymmetrical risk because that risk is kind of pretty clear, and you're no worse off than you were before we showed up. For us, we put all of that capex in upfront. We need a period of time to recover the capex and make money on that investment. So we have a lot at risk from day one. Our customer has a modest amount of risk, and it's related to simply you're not going to get the savings you'd hoped, and you're back to where you started. But I think it's asymmetrical, and I think it's a risk that we have to be very cognizant of. So from our perspective, we can't do this with everybody. We have to look at customers who we view as strong customers that they can perform over a period of time. They look at us. One of the nice things that looking at SolMicroGrid is, we are a portfolio company of Morgan Stanley Energy Partners. And that is, most people view that as pretty good pedigree. And I think that provides some comfort that we are a credible party who can deliver what we say we're going to deliver.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I mean, because it does sound like, Kirk, based on how you describe the model, it does sound like you're taking on the risk, right? You've got to build the system, you got to maintain the system, you got to collect payments from the property owner. And then I'm not sure how you capitalize your business, but I'm assuming you're going to have to somehow package this to investors. I mean, so what can you share with us about how the financial model behind this works? I'm not sure if you saw our previous episode. Last couple of weeks, we've been talking about the Wall Street Journal's recent article about how the Wall Street finance machine for rooftop residential solar is seizing up, and there just seems to be less demand for residential solar-backed bonds because the default rates are starting to increase. Can you explain to us a little bit more about the financial engine behind SolMicroGrid, to the extent that you can, and how are you positioning yourself to weather the storm, the current storm, so to speak?
Yeah, right now our capital comes strictly from Morgan Stanley Energy Partners, a wonderful group that knows this industry inside and out, and has a lot of credibility in the marketplace. As we grow bigger and bigger, we can go in a lot of different directions when it comes to capital. One potential direction is one that's been done by others and is a proven route, and that is when you get enough of these C&I projects together in a tranche, you can basically recapitalize the tranche. And that's something that's been going on in the energy business for quite some time. So securitizing a group of projects, either with debt or some other form of capital in the capital stack, is a route that people like us would traditionally pursue. But as it stands right now, our capital is provided entirely from Morgan Stanley.
Interesting. Okay. So does the business plan change at all in light of what just happened with the big, beautiful bill passing and, a little bit more strict guidelines in terms of how these tax credits can be applied?
Yeah, I think so. But we do have in our business, as long as we get things into service between now and the end of 2027, we're relatively unaffected. Foreign entities of concern and how that plays into it is sort of a different set of risks that the whole industry will have to deal with, and we've dealt with in the past in renewable energy. But we do have this period of time where essentially nothing changes. But I do think, just like in the past, we'll probably, as we get closer to the end of 2027, start having to do things a little bit differently. And it's really more, if you assume you lose certain federal incentives, what does that do to your business? I think that gives us time to adjust. It gives us time to continue to see the benefits derived from the evolution of our industry and how people have adapted in the past in terms of some of the solar OEM sourcing to avoid the issues that we're talking about here. So, I think the industry will be able to adapt. I think because we not only benefit from federal incentives, but we also benefit from some state and local incentives. They remain in place, but they always evolve as well. the whole industry, the financing of the industry evolves at both the federal and the state level, and it's not something that we haven't dealt with before. And so I think we'll be able to deal with it effectively under these circumstances now as well.
Okay. So do you guys do all your builds in-house for the new projects, or do you work with subcontractors? How do you sort of handle the boots on the ground side of the business?
Yeah, we like so many people in this business, we rely quite a bit on subcontractors because we are a national entity. We have to have a lot of regional capabilities, and that's usually provided by subcontractors. And we're very careful who we use and how we go to market with them. But that allows us to be very agile, so we can enter markets and expand quickly because we can rely on subcontractors who do this for a living in that particular market to support that kind of, not only the kind of growth, but the flexibility we need to adjust to changing demand.
That makes sense. Makes sense. Well, I know a lot of installers out there in the residential space specifically are going to be looking at ways that they can diversify either out of residential completely, or at least make sure that they have a good portion of their work in the CNI sector, since we do expect residential to slow down significantly after the new year. Is there any message that you would have to maybe solar installers that are doing residential today of what they might be able to do in partnership with SolMicroGrid?
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you asked me that question, Joe, because I mentioned before we have something called microgrids and more, and we talked about array to microgrids. We have another program which we call Energy as a Service Partners Program, and what we do there is we try to find developers who really want to do their business on a build and sell basis. So they want to build projects and sell them to the customers, so the customer owns and operates the solar project. We come in and we say, okay, Mr. Developer, listen, if you have a customer who really doesn't want to own and operate it, but wants a PPA or wants an energy as a service arrangement, we'll step in between you and your customer, and you can sell us the project. We, in turn, will enter into a PPA or an energy as a service agreement for your original customer, who now becomes our customer. So that takes a build and sell developer and can convert it into a PPA or energy as a service offering for a customer who doesn't necessarily want to own the project themselves. So ATM, I mentioned earlier, we're finding a lot of interest in that program. We just recently rolled out this other program, but we are finding that there's a lot of really good developers out there, residential and CNI, who want to continue doing what they do, but they do have an issue because they don't have either the deep pockets to provide the project on a PPA or energy as a service basis, but they want to continue doing what they've been doing in the past. And we can just jump in the middle there, and I think it makes it a win-win for them as well as a win-win for their original customer who doesn't want to own the system.
Okay, that makes sense. And then what about potential clients of yours? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you, or to learn more about, if the SolMicroGrid solution would be a good fit for their business?
Everything we've been talking about here this morning, Joe, is on our website, SolMicroGrid, one word.com, SolMicroGrid.com. If you go there, we have these one-page flyers that basically is one page and describes the various programs, the various offerings we have in layman's terms, and people can download them right off our site and look at them, and if it makes sense, reach out to us via our website, and we'll start a conversation. Very easy.
So, Kirk, I know you mentioned earlier that you have a relationship with Morgan Stanley. Can you explain a little bit, what is the nature of the relationship between SolMicroGrid and Morgan Stanley?
Yeah, we are really, really benefiting from that relationship. Morgan Stanley came in and has providing not only the capital for the growth of this company, but because they are so knowledgeable of the energy space, they bring a lot of other benefits that help us be successful. So, one of those benefits is simply the reputation of Morgan Stanley. We've had some very significant people approach us, and I say, how did you find us? Why did you call us? And they often say, well, unlike a lot of other developers of renewable energy projects, we noticed that you were a Morgan Stanley Energy Partner portfolio company, and that gave us the confidence that what you said you could do and what you could deliver are going to be realized. And so having that association with Morgan Stanley, I think, is a nice attribute for SolMicroGrid, and we are really lucky to have them, in our corner.
That's great. Well, Kirk, I know we're getting towards the end of the interview here. I will give you the last word. Is there anything else that the audience should know about SolMicroGrid or your partnership with Morgan Stanley that you mentioned?
Now, I think, Joe, there's a lot of talk in the renewable energy space, and a lot of talk about climate change and all of these things, and it gets people very passionate. But there's a couple of things that I think are driving this market. One is the whole world is growing to become more electric dependent. Everyone is starting to power things with electricity, be it vehicles, whatever. It's a trend that you see going on in the market. So the need for additional electricity is going to continue to grow. At the same time, most power systems, including the United States, is based upon a model that involves central generation and then a network of wires, transmission and distribution networks. That's a given. And that network of wires tends to be underinvested, and there's a lot of choke points, and there's a lot of vulnerabilities in that system. Finally, I think we all agree that severe weather events are increasing. And when you put those three givens together, what happens when you have a severe weather event? You turn on the news wherever it is, and you see all the devastation, but you see a lot of power lines down. And then there's a lot of work that has to go into restringing power lines just to bring power back to these unfortunate communities. So those are three givens. And I think the interesting thing about that is, I'm not going to argue, why it's happening, but I think those are things that everyone sees every day. And the need for microgrids, which is basically a distributed energy delivery business model, I think everyone can see why that makes sense. If you have smaller generation and you rely less on wires, I think those three givens that I just mentioned, you're going to benefit because you're going to have less disruption risk. So I'm really excited about the whole future of microgrids, and I'm just really happy that SolMicroGrid can be part of it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very innovative model, and especially if you're a business owner in one of these markets with very high rate of electricity, thinking San Diego area, Southern California, San Francisco Bay Area, and you have a solution where without you having to outlay any capital, you can get solar generation, you can get battery storage and battery backup and or even EV charging installed at your business, and you still end up paying a lower rate of electricity than sticking with the power company. That sounds like a very, very compelling offer. So Kirk, I thank you for taking the time to chat with our audience today, educate us about energy as a service, and let us know what you're doing over at SolMicroGrid. I hope that you can come on with us again in the future and let us know how the business is doing.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that does it for today's episode. I thank you all for spending some more time on the Solar Surge channel. And as always, I'm Joe Ordia here, encouraging you to get prepared and be empowered. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.